Lately, Americans are feeling the impact of inflation, gas price hikes, food shortages, political upheavals, and global misinformation. And we've been asking for answers on what is going on. Since the inauguration of the 46th president, Joe Biden, we have bared witness to political corruption, failed policies, and being on the brink of poverty. So many things happening worldwide and here in America. That should leave you wondering, is doomsday near?
Is there a doomsday plan for a time like this?
As a nation, we have faced, or should I say, continue to face humanitarian issues, financial burdens, and food shortages. But our government sees fit to send money to foreign nations to finance their violence and political agendas as long as the military industrial complex and large corporate businesses get their fair share of profits. For some, the impact is minimal, but a majority of Americans can't say the same thing. Living paycheck to paycheck, or worse yet, skipping meals to ensure someone else close to them can have food in their bellies. We have entered an uncertain time in our history, not just in America, but the world. The president, world leaders, the globalist elite, and the United Nations are gearing up to make decisions that will affect us all. This part of our conditioning is like Pavlov's dog experiment, which is to make us feel helpless and place our faith in the government and world leaders or the elite. In turn, all we need to do is give up our freedoms for the sake of security, which will come in the form of financial security, food on our shelves, and worst of all, blind obedience to those in power behind the accelerated preconditioning of human society.
The future is not just happening. The future is built by us. The future is built by us.
Pavlov's dog experiment played a critical role in the discovery of one of the most important concepts in psychology, classical conditioning. While it happened by accident, Pavlov's famous experiment had a major impact on our understanding of how learning takes place, as well as the development of the school of behavioral psychology. Pavlovian conditioning is defined as a form of behavioral psychology or behaviorism in which an animal or a human can be conditioned to respond in a certain way to a stimulus that, had it not been conditioned, should in no way be associated with the act in question. For example, smoking is an unhealthy behavior that is learned. Cigarette advertisements associate smoking with sexy people and having fun. Classical conditioning. Nicotine gives a pleasurable, stimulating sensation. Operant conditioning. Teenagers sometimes learn to smoke by watching their parents, older siblings, or peers smoke. Social learning theory. Understand? A great example of classical conditioning is how the government constantly informs Americans about the issues of our country and who is to blame. Politicians on the left continue to fault former President Trump and his supporters, or place the blame on your woes on the COVID-19 pandemic. The administration now blames Russian President Vladimir Putin. In addition, our social issues are further exacerbated through negative reinforcement, such as critical race theory, especially to young minds in the education system. My point is that repetition of an ideology, slogan, or social rhetoric repeated long enough over and over again will become the truth and the reality. This, my friends and family, are what is happening today. And only those not poisoned by the Kool-Aid see the real truth. The real agenda is creating a herd mentality in the population.
Pavlov's contribution in introducing the concept of classical conditioning was to bring to us an understanding of how we learn by association, how we learn that one thing leads to another.
The conditions to set up mass formation psychosis include lack of social connectedness and common sense, as well as large amounts of latent anxiety and passive aggression. The current administration and social justice advocacy groups are inundating people with a narrative that presents a plausible object of anxiety and a strategy for coping with it, then convincing many individuals or groups to battle the object with a collective single-mindedness. This allows people to stop focusing on their problems, avoiding personal mental anguish, instead focusing all their thought and energy on this new object of anxiety. And as mass formation psychosis progresses, the group becomes increasingly bonded and connected with a state of delusion, or rather, in a state of delusion. Their focal point of attention is narrowed, and they become unable to consider alternative points of view. Leaders, advocates, government, and social groups of such movements, as I mentioned, are revered and unable to do no wrong. A great example is current President Biden and his administration's blunder in Afghanistan, inflation, food shortages, biolabs in Ukraine, and overall denial of their ineffectiveness of handling COVID-19. But foolish and brainwashed continue to support him. Why? Because their psychosis began as far back as 2016 and continued throughout 2021 with the Russia hoax, the 2016 election Russian interference, speeches taken out of context, and the deep state's fear their reign of political power would be exposed and brought into the light. Left unabated, a society under the spell of mass formation will support a totalitarian governance structure capable of otherwise unthinkable atrocities to maintain compliance. Note, mass formation is different from groupthink. There are easy ways to fix groupthink by just bringing in dissenting voices and making sure you give them their platform. It isn't easy with mass formation. Even when the narrative falls apart, cracks in the strategy aren't solving the issue. The hypnotized crowd can't break free of the narrative. This is what appears to be happening now with COVID-19, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, inflation, the southern border crisis, the January 6th insurrection hearing, and the overturning of Roe versus Wade. The solution for those in control of the narrative is to produce bigger and bigger lies to prop up the solution. Those being controlled by mass formation no longer can use reason to break free of the group narrative. The prerequisites for mass formation psychosis begins with some sort of social isolation, like the lockdowns during COVID-19. Remember that? It wasn't too long ago Americans felt the anxiety associated with isolation. Or further back during the 9/11 event, the isolationism of Muslims in America because of the event. This is one of several methods introduced into a ripe society by the government, the media, or social justice groups backed by the world's elite like George Soros, who, by the way, funds over 200 organizations in the United States alone in an attempt to change the American society. Now, spreading fear and anxiety through the media is the most predominant method. However, the film, songs, celebrity opinions, and radical politicians add to your conditioning with their in-your-face type of hysteria that is further promoted as a form of social justice. In addition, social justice groups add to the confusion and create fear by claiming societal issues about race, religion, gender identity, and other issues. But the truth is, some cases are to force acceptance of deviant behavior, immoral behavior, and decadence. Anything that can cause strife between multiple segments of a society is what the authors of mass formation psychosis are counting on. The second condition is some sort of despair or hopelessness. This is easy. Poverty, unemployment, and financial burdens. When enjoyment or freedom is removed from your everyday life, like the pandemic, the focus of your anxiety is in the form of resentment or animosity towards the cause of your affliction. And if promoted just right, the object of your anxiety is identified as a specific group and even an ideology, like Christianity. For example, Asians were targeted as the root cause of COVID-19, and the Trump supporters were targeted as racists for voting the president into office. The third condition is being in a constant state of fear, anxiety, or anger. When the condition exists, the afflicted will look for any reason or action to relieve this feeling. The fourth and final condition, a leader or a group of leaders presumed to have the solution to all the problems. A great example is Bill Gates, purporting to have the solution to fight the current and future pandemics. Of course, his solution is through forced inoculations, or a social dilemma like racism. Our leaders and various social justice advocates state it can end with the orientation and acceptance by school-aged children of critical race theory. These are leaders who promise to make things better. And unfortunately, if you are part of the mass formation psychosis, you'll accept their solutions as gospel. The afflicted then develop a fixation on this solution and welcome it as the best alternative. Hitler's final solution was the mass murder of Jews in the furnaces of Germany for the German societal problems. You don't think that could happen again? What about today, in which the political left wants to defund the police to end the killing of black men in America? So, the group facing a majority of the responsibility for the deaths are the law enforcement officers. And guess what? There have been a rise in deaths in law enforcement officers. Even Asians living in America face indirect culpability for the COVID-19 pandemic because when a society is scared, it needs a person or a group to blame. Textbook fear-mongering is the root cause, but we've become so desensitized and tolerant that we don't realize we've been conditioned with the available technologies. Technologies that have been conditioned we can't do without. And I will argue the prerequisites have been met in most historical events in the world, including our present era as well. And politicians, globalists, and the elite hope to leverage this behavior by attacking your rights and exacerbating the social issues with strong and sometimes violent rhetoric. And like the obedient, we don't question the motives or truth behind what we are told today. Deception is an acceptable character trait of leaders and social advocates who knowingly have no basis for their ideology. Unfortunately, when you've believed a lie for a long time, and again, it becomes your reality.